Hello and welcome back to my channel. In part 1 of this series, I stated that I had no idea who Colleen Ballinger was, and that, quote unquote, unless Swoop does a documentary, I don't know/care about what family vloggers, the beauty community, and or drama/commentary channels are doing on YouTube. Well, guess what? Swoop has weighed in and just dropped the second part of her, I believe it's going to be a 3-part series on Colleen Ballinger. So Swoop went over Colleen's non-apology song where she pointed out Darvo. Now, just as a little side note, Emily D. Baker did a members-only live stream where she cross-examined Colleen with a glow-in-the-dark ukulele. But I digress. Anyway, I was struck by just how much this non-apology song resembled Andy Signor's treatment of his current round of victims, which he likes to conflate with those from back in 2017. How do I know this? Because people on Twitter like to say he, quote-unquote, already addressed all of this with the video in 2019, the one he brings up over and over, where he managed to scrounge up proof that one accuser had a consensual relationship with him at some point. But what about the other 8 women? Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I pointed out Darvo in relation to Andy Signor before. Darvo refers to a reaction perpetrators of wrongdoing, particularly sexual offenders, may display in response to being held accountable for their behavior. Darvo stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. This occurs, for instance, when an actually guilty perpetrator assumes the role of, quote-unquote, falsely accused and attacks the accuser's credibility and blames the accuser of being the perpetrator of a false accusation. One of Andy's Darvo-esque posts. That's the scary delusional one That's the scary delusional one I speak of. Always clips me out of context and only focuses on trying to destroy me. It's the same one who clipped my 4-year-old walking into my studio, always wanting to push my computer buttons as, quote-unquote, as uncomfortably pulling away from me, and tagged child services labeling me a creep to look into. Same psychopath account my eternal victims promote and encourage to slide in all my replies and mentions to defame and harass me and my family daily for almost a year now. It's scary, it's violent, shows what kind of people they truly are. Folks have flagged her and others targeted harassment and stalking for months at Elon Musk at Twitter safety. Anyway, Saggy rightly points out that 1, you're a public person who is not exempt from criticism for being called out for your bad behavior. 2, if you feel like you and your family are in danger, contact the authorities. 3, victim card was revoked when another wave of women came out to expose that you never changed. Now, my response to this is that Andy's exhibiting Darvo tactics, and I just went through what Darvo means. Further, there is this lovely article on narcissisticabuserehab.com. How narcissists use Darvo to escape accountability. Look, I am not a mental health professional, nor do I play one on the internet. It's just that Andy seems to exhibit many of these traits, allegedly, in my opinion. So here, Manya Wakefield says that Darvo is a tactical maneuver manipulators use to groom individuals and indeed entire social groups. It involves controlling people's perception of events through a specific sequence of actions. Those who experience the Darvo process often feel disoriented as the perpetrator of abuse actively revises the facts and distorts the truth. By crafting a fictional narrative that bears no resemblance to reality, they sow seeds of doubt. Bystanders regrettably accept the manipulator's lies as truth. Meanwhile, The recipient of the abuse becomes a scapegoat and a target of vilification. It almost sends shivers down my spine on how accurate this is. So the article goes on and says that Darvo is a defense mechanism used by manipulators when they are confronted for their actions to evade accountability. It is a fusion of gaslighting and blame shifting. This goes through what does it look like. So first, there's the deny part. It begins with the adamant refusal to accept any responsibility or acknowledge having a role or any involvement in the harmful behavior or actions. The truthful account of the events is stridently rejected and minimized. Denial seeks to deflect blame. Consequently, it also implies that it is in fact the perpetrator who is being subjected to an injustice by being wrongly accused of something they did not do. Denial distorts or disregards the reality of a situation. Step 2. Attack. The second stage of Darvo involves character assassination, with the aim of redirecting blame onto the person who confronted the perpetrator, scapegoating the innocent party, and burdening them with accountability for the crimes of the aggressor. By shifting blame away from themselves, serve their self-image, reputation, and/or position of power. It shields them from criticism and negative judgment. Darvo attacks often involve victim blaming, distorting facts, minimizing the impact of their own actions, and exaggerating the faults of whoever confronts the perpetrator. The attack is essentially a smear campaign. Step 3. Reverse victim and offender. Once the character assassination has formed a critical mass of bystanders who are successfully deceived by the manipulator's false narrative, the victim survivors is subjected to the painful process of scapegoating. The final stages of Darvo sees the victim cast as a villain while the perpetrator is exonerated. The reversal of victims and offender relies on pre-existing biases, stereotypes, or prejudices. It is often used to animate bystanders into persecuting and punishing the victim survivor. And all of this, with what happened in 2017 when Andy was fired from Screen Junkies and quote-unquote canceled, he managed to dig up text messages between himself and one of the victims out of 9 that shows that they at one time had a consensual affair. What isn't known is if and or when she withdrew the consent. And this is echoed in what Brittany went through with Andy. She was more or less consensual for like 10 days. And then she said, no, I think we should just be friends. She was highly uncomfortable. And yet he kept pushing it. And he would send her unsolicited videos of him pleasuring himself. I mean, it's the same cycle, and hardly anybody realizes it, no matter how much we speak out, because, you see, we're the ones picking on him. Darvo. Language used. This is examples of deny, attack, reverse, victim, and offender. The language used by perpetrators and their supporters during Darvo campaigns may sound like this. I didn't do anything, but if I did, it wasn't that bad. It never happened, but if it did, it wasn't that bad. Because they tend to minimize what the actual victim has gone through. At the local level, this strategy is common among perpetrators of sexual offenses, emotional abuse, and domestic violence. Darvo is a regular feature of coercive and controlling behavior. I know, we're kind of getting a little bit deep into the weeds, but coercive control, gaslighting, emotional abuse. I mean, these were all things, I mean, heck, even I went through it at a very minimal level. But, Nola Lola, Shadow even more so. And then, of course, Brittany and Jade. So, who gets targeted for Darvo? For Darvo to occur, a power imbalance must exist. Similarly, it is particularly effective when the abuser has more social capital than the survivor. Generally, if the perpetrator is a member of a dominant group and the survivor belongs to a disenfranchised group, the likelihood of leaving the survivor is lower. Again, I'm talking about myself, but I'm in a disenfranchised group that consists of ex-mods of Popcorn Planet, some others that were members, supporters, some who gave a good amount of money to Andy. So I guess we're the disenfranchised group, and that's why I chuckled a little bit, because I never really thought of it that way, but it's so true. People who are likely candidates for Darvo are survivors who confront their abuser, whistleblowers, hello, whistleblower here, socially vulnerable individuals or groups. For example, women are more likely to be targeted for Darvo than men. And as I've said so many times, Andy's community consists of abuse and trauma survivors. They are vulnerable. What is the purpose of Darvo? The Darvo tactic serves many purposes. It is a smokescreen used by manipulators to conceal the truth of their behavior. It enables the manipulator to control how others perceive the target and the conflict. It often stuns the targeted person into confusion and silence. Thus, the abuser is able to craft a scapegoat story, which is used to cultivate biases against the target and rally bystanders to their cause. Now, if you haven't been following along with all of this, when we left Andy's community, there was a lot of confusion, and poor Brittany, she stayed silent. She was so gaslit, and so was Shadow and Jade. Oh God. And it took some of them a while to come out. Now, I was sort of at the very edge of the group, kind of on the outside looking in, which is why I've been able to speak out about this consistently since, I don't know, a year ago, February or March. In the Darvo climate, no amount of evidence will suffice as proof of the abuser's transgressions. Let me say that again. In a Darvo climate, no amount of evidence will suffice as proof of the abuser's transgressions. We have run into this over and over and over and over and over again. But we will persist. Bystanders willingly suspend their relationship with reality out of self-interest. The victim survivor is objectified and reduced to a dehumanizing stereotype. Therefore, a social circle groomed by a manipulator with prominent antisocial traits will not believe them. Instead, the target will endure a terrifying campaign of victim blaming and hate from the group. The perpetrator's endgame is the complete destruction of the victim, either by social death, psychological destabilization, and or self-destruction. This is all very, very scary. No matter how much proof we put out with what little we've been able to gather, because Andy uses Telegram's secret chat feature, which makes things self-destruct. And those who, I mean, even more casual viewers just buy wholeheartedly into Andy's innocence. And I understand why, because Andy is very charismatic and he's very convincing. I mean, he convinces people who are on a fixed income to give up the money they need for medication to him. It's wild. I watched it happen when I was a mod. People are like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any money right now." As Andy was saying, "Hey, you should pay for a 2-drink minimum because I'm entertaining you." Even to people who were paying for memberships, and it was like $6 a month at the lowest tier. The social circle that is groomed by the manipulator. So all of those who are defending them, you've been groomed too. Nice, huh? So they don't believe us. Luckily, we have each other to lean on, and more we're understanding exactly what's happening. And I hope that all of the women that have not yet come out publicly will, just that they know that we're here for them, that they're not alone. And honestly, there's nothing that Andy can do to further hurt or humiliate them. And the more there are that come out against him, the easier it will be to hopefully maybe one day get him to understand that. Get him to understand what? That he's a horrid human being. So here we go. Darvo was the collective grooming tactic. The cognitive distortions created by Darvo cultivate an ecosystem of moral corruption. Wow. The cognitive distortions created by Darvo cultivate an ecosystem of moral corruption. The manipulator weaponizes the empathy of their supporters and encourages negative biases about the recipient of the abuse. They foster a culture of binary thinking among their enablers. Furthermore, manipulators do this in order to ensure that members of the dominant clique become indifferent and callous about the betrayal of the survivor. In conclusion, the desensitization of the group opens the door to the objectification of the victim survivor, and once this happens, every kind of violence becomes acceptable. Examples are manifestations of anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, and homophobia. Okay, so the weaponizes the empathy of their supporters. Yep. Encourages negative biases about the recipient of the abuse. Yep. Culture binary thinking among their enablers. Yes, hello, Steph, Lewis, Kim, Joe, Wancho. Members of the dominant clique become indifferent and callous. Oh, I'm sorry. I should also include Will in that, because a lot of these people went to people that they thought were a little bit more sympathetic or that they could reach easier than Andy, like Will and Steph, and got into the either circular argument that Will liked to do or just the downright dismissal that Steph likes to do. Okay, so why do bystanders participate? Let's see. Perpetual blindness is a survival mechanism that arises when awareness would threaten necessary relationships. In other words, bystanders yield to betrayal blindness in the interest of looking out for themselves and to avoid the loss or pain they might risk if they sympathize with the target. They assign more value to the relationship with the abuser, so it follows that it's in their best interest to empathize with the narcissist, not the survivor. They assign more value to their relationship with the abuser in their best interests. Yep. Empathize with the narcissist, not the survivor. Hello, Kim. In many cases, bystanders may actually benefit from gaining social capital by supporting the perpetrator. Therefore, it is typically a combination of a desire for personal gain and self-preservation instinct that overrides ethical and moral considerations in these bystanders. In other words, members of their clique often cope with conflicts within the group by willfully ignoring the harmful behaviors exhibited by the narcissist and turning a blind eye. How did all this start? Oh yeah, Wancho was having a subathon, for his group. And Shadow and I were doing our best to help him out. That's how all this began. And Wancho is still firmly riding right up Andy's backside and vilifying us. So, Yep. And who else got social capital? Oh yeah, Kim. Now, for those that don't really know, it's Kim has been a co-host in Andy's channel. She and Nola Lola and I were in the headlines group together. Lola and I decided to leave. We talked to Kim separately to let her know why we were leaving. And then the next thing we knew, she was suddenly a co-host and had her own channel that Andy was sending subscribers to. So it's kind of like Kim got paid off to, at the very least, ignore us and at most betray us. Especially Nola Lola, because she considered them friends. Nice, huh? The long-term effect on survivors. Darvo can have devastating consequences on the mental health of victim survivors. Firstly, it leads to chronic anxiety, panic, major depression, and post-traumatic stress. These conditions, in turn, significantly impact the survivor's physical well-being. Moreover, the process invalidates the survivor's lived experience, inflicting additional pain and suffering as they are denied any form of justice. Instead of acknowledging the wrong done to them, individuals further persecute and blame survivors despite their victimhood. Moreover, the rejection from peers and the perpetrator's immunity to accountability continuously pour salt into the survivor's wounds, repeatedly re-traumatizing them. Now, look, for the most part, I think that Shadow, Nola Lola, and I have dealt with these effects. Doesn't mean there aren't triggering events at times. And Brittany and Jade are in a whole other class. But I believe that they too are working through things and realizing just how wrong everything was and how toxic Andy's community was and still is. But we will continue speaking out until Andy's held accountable. Andy and his cohorts.